Greet you all students of MA final. This is paper 4th, Indian Writing in English, and Unit C, Indian English Poetry. I would start with Nissim Askil, and in the last one it was brushing up session. We discussed the significant aspects of Indianness. The crux is always on the spirit of Indianness. And students, mind you, you must have deeper understanding about the background of Indian English poetry as well. You must be curious to know, whenever you study any literary text, it must be clear to you what kind of age that was and what were the characteristic features. And yeah, Indian English poetry, it is marked by cultural ethos, socio-political advancement, spiritual religious dimensions. So in this context, it is a must to know the background of Indian English poetry, which has been categorized into 4 parts. And the first, which is called the Age of Pioneers. And the famous poets in this age, Henry Desrosiers, Michael Madhusudan Dutt, and Kashi Prasad Ghosh. Now, what is the peculiar aspect of this age? That, these poets and writers, they were influenced by British poets and, say, Victorians. Their mindset, it was preoccupied by romantics. So we had an echo of that. Then we come to the second era, that is called the era of Indian Renaissance. As the name itself is suggestive, Renaissance, in which we have revival, reawakening in the art, culture, literature, architecture, and all these. And literature is mirror of life, and that's why reflection of the age. It is not confined to one aspect. On the one hand, we have mystical poems by Swami Ramtis. On the other hand, Taru Dutt, and she was very much influenced by Indian culture. You must have read her poem Lakshman, and even Lotus, nice poems, in which she was really highly impressed with the rich cultural heritage of India. And quite often she quotes in her work, and see, 2 works, they are very important. So many other works, the Ancient Ballad and the Legend of Hindustani. So at that time, these poets in this particular era, they tended to cover different aspects of human life, the life which witness the Indianness. The Indianness which is in the blood and veins of these poets. And this period, it started from 1870 to 1900. Then we have third one, that is era of political awakening. Again, nomenclature, political awakening, very, very prominent, because it witnessed the most important event in the whole range of Indian history. Indelibly imprinted with the memory of Indians. Yes, independence. So 1900 to 1947, and that's why this era, this period, it was marked by a spirit of nationalism, patriotism, Indianness, and reflection of our culture, and so many other aspects. And see, we have, the poets like Rabindranath Tagore, Sarojini Naidu, and we have Sri Aurobindo also in this era. We have, Harindranath Chattopadhyay, very famous poet, and especially for his famous collection, The Feast of Youth. And see, we have reflection of contemporary reality. And Rabindranath Tagore, he became popular, very famous signature, and even in the global screen. He was recipient of Nobel Prize for Gitanjali. So, you know, we have amalgamation of different confluence of different ideas, ideologies, and then that's why very flourishing period. This is era of political awakening, marked social change, and you know, even in the social cultural values as well. And again, this era, it witnessed practical experimentation also. Different kinds of poems, we have lyrics, say, and sonnets, ballads. And Sarojini Naidu, you know, she was very popular, and the, you know, Nightingale of India, this, you know, she was at the time, the people, you know, they were fond of reading her poems, and his famous collection, The Golden Threshold. And you must have studied at second year level, Sarojini Naidu and Rabindranath Tagore. And Rabindranath Tagore's famous poem, that when mind is without fear, head is held high, knowledge is free. So, you know, students of literature, at least at this level, you should have idea, and even for your personal enrichment and for your better performance in examination as well. Then we come to very important period, that is the era of independence or modern poetry. And listen, Askill, and I mean, the most of the poets prescribed in your syllabus, they, you know, belong to this era, this period, this age. And this is called the era of independence or modern poetry. Started from 1947 and still, I mean, onwards. Now, most significant characteristic feature of this age, it is the age of industrialization, urbanization, the impact on globalization, yes. You know, it is the era of postmodern era of globalization, and as well as advancement in technology. So, obviously, experimentation even in the domain of literature, poetry. So, it is marked by innovation as well. And see, Nissim Askill, you know, he is regarded as a great revolutionary spirit. Now, revolutionary spirit, as we discuss this, you know, discuss this point, just, you know, I mentioned this point rather, the last turn also, and we will discuss in much detail. Now, what is the reason behind it? You know, with transparency, with honesty, he depicted different aspects of human life. As he pointed out that poetry and literature, you know, it is an expression of human sensibility. That's why even so far as structured part is concerned, this age is significant from the point of experimentation, not any set form or structure. And as these poets, they pointed out that it's, you know, literature, and even, you know, any kind of literary piece or a poem, it must be free from intellectual imposition. So what is significant? Intellectual freedom for a good poem, for really poetry in the true sense of term. So this period, you know, marked by radical changes, social, cultural values as well, and writer and poets, you know. Yeah, here another important point that I would like to focus, you know, regarding the workshop that is held in Calcutta. And this workshop of writers and poets, and they focused a manifesto. And what was the manifesto of literature? Manifesto of poetry, not only poetry, but I mean literature in general. That they discussed that intellectual freedom, all these aspects, and the you know, literature, it is expression of, say, positivism as well. And, it must be free from any kind of propaganda. Yes. No political imposition. And this must be really the poetry of transparency. So, why? What is the reason? Because writing poetry, and yes, now I am reminded of one of his famous poems which is prescribed in your syllabus also, Nissim Askill, the poem which is The Poet, Lover and Bird Watcher. So the art of writing poetry, it is really very pious experience, creative experience, aesthetic experience and real experience, practical experience. Therefore, and we would discuss, I would, naturally begin with that. The first poem, that is Poet, Lover and Bird Watcher. I would start tomorrow with that, the poem. And so the famous poets in this era, which is called the era of independence of modern poetry, Nissim Askill, A.K. Ramanujan, K.N. Daruwala, P. Parthasarthi, Jayant Mahapatra, Kamla Das, and many other poets. Now, we would also discuss a brief biographical sketch of Nissim Askill. Students of MA Final, you must be keen to know about this famous personality, this very popular personage and persona, Nissim Askill. His time period 1924 to 2004, and he was born of Jewish parents, and he hailed from very reputed, educated family, and his family it is devoted to education, and that's why he had inherited wisdom and merits, traits from his noble parents. This is very important point so far as the poet Nissim Askill is concerned. And now I would like to focus on the versatile personage of the poet. And see, can you believe at the age of 17, 18, when he was doing his undergraduation, at that time, he was so much influenced by the political upheaval, changes in the society, that he was a member of Radical Democratic Party. And he was very, very dynamic personality, very active. And students must have deeper understanding about the interest and multi-dimensional areas, domains in which Nissim Askill was really interested. And he was really, regarded as a great social activist, yes, social activist. And he was the manager of, well-known printing house. And see, not only one domain, one discipline, he was a multi-dimensional personality. As I discussed, I mentioned this point earlier also. He was the manager even in a well-known advertising firm. Yes. And literature, obviously, he had passion for literature, especially for poetry. But see, philosophy also. He studied philosophy, and it was his in-depth study in this discipline, in this subject also, philosophy. And yeah, he was professor of English in Bombay University, Khalsa College also, he was there also. And yes, he became so popular that people, they used to invite him even abroad in various universities. And in this, context, one of the examples I would like to give, a time constraint we have. So he was, visiting professor professor of English literature, where at the University of Leeds, abroad, Yes, and he was very much interested. Or rather, it was his passion. Journalism was also, and that's why media activist people call him media activist even at that time. And he edited, he edited several journals, and he was in editorial board, one of the chief editors. And in which journals? Yes, Quest and Print. I mean, this is very important point for you, because when you write an examination, your marks will be improved. You will secure very good marks if you tend to cover different dimensions, different aspects, so far as this poet is concerned, or so far as Indian English poetry is concerned. So you can, add certain points and you cite some examples. So he was also regarded as an artist, and you would be, curious to know about, his different areas of interest. He was, he got success in conducting a program on art of acting also. He conducted a course in art at JJ School of Arts. You must have heard this famous JJ School of Arts. And then he was also director in theatre unit Bombay. So you must be inspired. And that's why I think it is very, very important to delve deep in the personage and personality of a poet. It is source of inspiration for the students. And that's why, when we would switch over to his very nice poem, I would like to begin rather with this second poem, The Poet, Lover and Bird Watcher, rather than the first one. So students, you would be inspired. And I always, put up this question to my students. Are you interested in writing poems or in creative writing? So for these students, bright students, all of you, such kind of, say, literary text, work of art, very important, as it must be source of inspiration for you. So, see, versatile personality, why? He was media activist, he was manager in a well-known advertising firm, and yes, he was, well-read in philosophy also, and editor, in journalism, in the field of journalism also, he got success and his achievements, as in the domain of art also. So, theatre, yes, even in theatrical skills, he was an adept in that also. So, and he was, a writer of many books. Authorship is also, he was regarded as he became popular as a poet. His, reputation as a poet. Everybody knows about this. And he occupied singular position in the whole range of, say, Indian English poetry, as, Nissim Haskell. But he, is the author of many books. His authorship is also important. Like, his books like Emerson Reader, Writing in India. These are, famous collections. Yes. And another important point that all the students, it must be in your tips that he, became popular for writing 6 collections. His poetic collections, mind you, 6 poetic collections we have. And the first one, The Time to Change. And see, this is, so many poems are published, and the time period is 1952. In the year 1952, this famous poetic collection of what is the title? Time to Change, it was published. And here, say, many poems, famous, popular poems, he became famous for writing, say, poetry. Yes, very nice poem. This is title of this poem is Poetry and Something to Pursue. And yes, in this poem, he pointed out, I remember, that change is the permanent aspect in this universe. Change, radical change. This is what he pointed out in one of his poems. And second collection, 60 poems. It was published in 1953. And I think one of his poems, Creation, yes, very nice. And you can read other poems also. If you want to secure good marks, excellent marks in examination, very nice and small poems. If you study these poems other than your syllabus, obviously you would be really feeling enriched. You would feel enriched that, oh, creation, and you can say, give some example of this, you can quote this poem while writing your answer, this skill as a poet, or his critical view, or we can say Indian English poetry, or Indianness, or so many other aspects, so far as this particular unit is concerned and paper is concerned. So this is 60 poems. It was published in 1953, and Creation and this Lord song, these famous poems. And then we have third, very nice title he had given, the third, and it was published in 1959. And say the title, some important poems, the title of some important poems like Episode and Rain, Sonnet. And I think this poem Episode, it is very, very moving. See, we have notion of empathy. It is predominating in Nissim Askell's poem. So Nissim Askell's poem, as generally, it is discussed, and it is generally not only discussed, say, written by critics in several articles, books, that, overemphasizing the theme of alienation and torture and humiliation. Students, mind you, so many other themes in his poems. Now, in this particular poem Episode, the poet, as I have pointed out, he, empathizes with poor people and how they are compelled to live such kind of life. So, students of literature, you should really be curious to know that, oh, this is human sensitivity. And the poet, he possesses extraordinary sensibility. And that's why we have remarkable collection in this third, fourth, all these 6 collections, but particular these poems. And it's very small and nice poems. You can go through it, you can read it, you can recite these poems. And then we have Episode, and yeah, nice when the title is so arresting, Aside. He has given this title, Aside and Rain and Sonnet. And as I told you earlier, that this age is marked by experimentation. So we have variety of poems, not very structured, set structure that, oh, only one kind of poems. We have, lyrics, sonnets, and then we have ballads, and different variety of poems we have. And then Unfinished Man is the 4th collection, and nice poem. Now, this is another prominent aspect of Nissim Askell, that his special bent of mind towards religiosity and spiritual bent of mind, because this poem is very different, very, peculiar kind of poem, and different from the poems prescribed in your syllabus. But that's why we come to know about his personality as a whole, in totality. And the title of the poem, yes, The Dialogue of Self and Soul. It's a very nice poem. And yeah, the poem Morning Walk and Case Study. These poems, they are published in 1960. And what is the poetic collection? In which collection? The Unfinished Man. These poems, they were published in this particular collection. Okay. Then we have 5th one, The Exact Name, 1965. And in India, yeah, when we talk about and when we delve deep the spirit of Indianness, then such poems, you can read such poems also. Very nice, and the love poems. And see, this is the fifth one, the exact name, yes. And see, some poems prescribed in your syllabus like Night of Scorpio and The Poet, Lover and Bird Watcher. These two poems, they were published in fifth one, okay? Mind you, in the fifth collection, that is the exact name, and it was published in 1965. Two poems prescribed your syllabus. They were also published in this particular collection, 1965, the exact name. Then final collection, The Hymn in Darkness. And philosophy, poetry reading. Now poetry reading is again very nice poem. And the poet, he had passion for philosophy. And when we discuss, when we delve deep, what about the different dimensions of Nissim Askill's poetry? This is, one of the important aspects we must encapsulate. And what's that? That he really loves philosophy, his area of interest. And he himself in his biography, and I mean one of his letters, and yes, one interview, it was published in a journal, in magazines also, and many interviews published in magazines. And in that, he reiterated this, that he had passion for 3P. Yes, students, remember 3P. And what are these 3P? Poetry, philosophy, and poverty. Because, certain phase in his life when he had to do a lot of struggle and some misfortune he had to face. And poverty, and even, he used to have sympathy, empathy with the people around, with the poor people. That's why poverty also, this sensitivity. So that's why, the poet, he always pointed out that literature is an expression of human sensitivity. Human sensibility. Human sensibility? Yes, this expression, and the poems prescribed in your syllabus, with this poem, The Poet, Lover and Bird Watcher. This, twice it was published because of the popularity of this poem. Earlier it was published, The Night of Scorpion, it was published in the exact name, and this poem, The Poet, Lover and Bird Watcher, it was published in Hymn in Darkness also, 1976 was the year, very important year. And yes, we would discuss more about Nissim Askill, and I would like to start with the poem, The Poet, Lover and Bird Watcher in the next turn. Thank you. We'll continue.